Miami stays hot in recruiting. Couple new crystal ball predictions. And yeah, the Canes have just landed a verbal commitment from a blue chip defensive player, a safety described as a heat-seeking missile from the 785 to the 305. JJ Dunnigan, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Victory Sunday. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the Everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On is now the #1 sports podcast network. And I got to thank you guys, the listeners and the viewers, because we couldn't be #1 without all of the enthusiasm, the big community that we've built. And it's not just my show, of course, the entire network. So many amazing, hardworking people that I work with on Locked On. We're #1 right now, my friends. And, you know, Miami is trying to trend closer to that #1 recruiting class. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. On this episode, we're going to review the Syracuse win and what Miami needs to take from that victory and that performance and carry it over into these final 3 games. Because your college football playoff chances, they're slim, but they're not dead. Your ACC Championship game chances are actually slimmer than the CFP chances, but thanks to all of the ACC chaos, teams losing left and right, those aren't dead either. So we're going to talk about all of that, but before we get to that, got to welcome the newest Miami Hurricanes verbal commit. 4-star safety JJ Dunnigan has just offered his verbal pledge to the U. Now, this is a player out of Manhattan High School in the Little Apple, Manhattan, Kansas. Of course, is the location of Kansas State University. He's a legacy of Kansas State, but he's also a former Kansas commit. He backed off his Kansas pledge in late October, and a couple of weeks later, now since backing off the Kansas pledge, he picked up an offer from Michigan, took a recent official visit to Colorado. He's in the books for a Miami official visit coming up next weekend. But he has just offered his verbal commit to the U. And I mentioned, guys, heat-seeking missile for JJ Dunnigan. 6'3", 200-pounder who loves violent contact. And that's already great size for a high school defensive back. It's 6'3", 200 pounds with the explosiveness and the athleticism. And, you know, something unique about Dunnigan is, and I guess this is not all that unique at the high school level, but doing multiple positions at the high level that he plays them. So 3-way player, offense, defense, and special teams. But he's scored touchdowns this year in all 3 phases, which is super impressive. Now, a lot of the recruiting services have him listed as a cornerback, but he's going to play safety at Miami. He's being recruited as a safety. So like on 24/7 Sports, they have him as the 11th rated corner in the class and the #2 player out of the state of Kansas. So that's, you know, I don't know how Kansas and Kansas State let this one slip away, but we know Miami recruits nationally, and their loss is Miami's gain. I can't emphasize this enough. The coaches within the building, they love this player. Like, this guy is one of those creatures that we talk about, the physical specimens, and he's got a lot of fans in the building at Miami. Long, rangy, violent, competitive, and a high football IQ, which is something that Miami is always looking for. He's an Under Armour All-American who also plays basketball. He's a track and field participant. He's got a 10.9400 meter. In his high school career, he's totaled 1,579 all-purpose yards, and he scored 10 touchdowns. So this guy is a Mr. Everything, and the senior tape for JJ Dunnigan is absolutely awesome. So as far as like Miami's plans in the defensive backfield long term, so they just land the verbal pledge from Dunnigan. Again, this is a former Kansas commit, Signatures from a number of other schools. I know Colorado was really trying to make this happen, but Miami wins out in this recruitment. Another big plan that Miami has at safety, they still really like Blake Stewart, who, he's landed some crystal balls to become a Miami Hurricane, hasn't landed at Miami just yet. But Blake Stewart recently decommitted from Clemson, and I think Miami really wants to pair JJ Dunnigan with Blake Stewart for 3 or 4 years because those two players complement one another really well. So I think that's kind of the long-term plan in the defensive backfield. So we'll have to keep our eyes on Blake Stewart. I know, Vanderbilt had been pushing for him. Georgia might have been taking a look at him now. He's an Atlanta area player. But since the Clemson decommit, Miami has been the one, trending for Blake Stewart. And, of course, since JJ Dunnigan decommitted from Kansas, Miami becomes the team that wins out that trend very, very quickly. So this is an awesome player. And, of course, any old school Miami fan, watching great safety play from the likes of Ed Reed and Sean Taylor over the years, like you're always looking for a guy who's that big hitter, who's that heat-seeking missile. And the Hurricanes believe that they have found one in JJ Dunnigan, class of 2026. And keep in mind, like it's November 9th right now. We're like 3 weeks and change away from National Signing Day. National Signing Day is coming up on December 3rd. So we talk about all these Miami commits that will soon be able to put pen to paper and make it official. And I mentioned at the top, Miami's got crystal balls to land other defensive players. So coming out of weekend visits, one that we're definitely going to be watching in the coming days and weeks is now former LSU commit DeAnthony Lafayette. It's a 4-star edge rusher out of Lake Nona in the Orlando area, an absolute stud. So Lafayette just decommitted, I believe, last night or this morning, decommitted from LSU. He visited Miami on Saturday. So, you put 2 and 2 together. He was at the Syracuse game. He liked what he saw from Miami's defensive line. And De Lafayette, who's someone Miami has really been pursuing despite him being committed to LSU. He decommits from LSU, and Miami starts landing these crystal balls. I know my guy Gabby Urruti at Inside the U put in the crystal ball prediction for Miami to land De Lafayette. Another defensive lineman who visited over the weekend is a Penn State commit, 3-star out of Delaware, top player in the state of Delaware, Isaac Chukwura, who also gets, I think it was Steve Wiltfong, put in the Fong bomb for Miami to flip Chukwura from Penn State. So there's flips, big-time defensive commitments, and crystal balls happening left and right for the Hurricanes. So Miami has currently the 11th rated class of 2026. Let's see how those rankings pan out right now. So Miami at number 11 is right behind Michigan, Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Oregon at 5, Notre Dame at 4, Alabama, Georgia, and USC with the number 1 class. And at number 11, Miami is right in front of 12th rated class at LSU, 13th rated class at Florida, Florida State at 14th. They just lost a big one in Tadarius Hughes. They lost him to Syracuse a couple days ago, which was a bit of a blow for them. North Carolina at 15, Clemson 16, and then, I don't want to bore you with the rest of the top, 25, but Miami is right in there now with 26 verbal commits. The Hurricanes had the 11th ranked class of 2026, and if they're able to pull off a couple more of these moves that they're working on, flips, guys that they're crystal balled for, you can expect Miami to hopefully close out a top 10 class before National Signing Day. So JJ Dunnigan is a big get, guys. And again, I can't emphasize enough how popular he is with Miami's coaching staff, how much belief he has. This is the violent, instinctive, high IQ, hard-hitting safety that Miami is really looking for. And I'm glad the Hurricanes were able to get this verbal commitment tonight, Sunday night, and hopefully they can get it over the finish line along with all these other great players. Currently 26 verbally committed to Miami. They're working on a few more. Let's hope we can get all these over the finish line for National Signing Day. And a big part of that is going to be finishing the season strong, right? It seemed like the recruits that were at the Syracuse game were impressed with what they saw, that Miami was physically dominant, and I'm sure that they enjoyed some of the creativity that Miami had on offense. It was more of an open game plan that we've seen all this year. And so we're going to dive into that when we come back. A couple of really important factors, team factors and individual factors that Miami is going to need to carry into these final 3 games. And one thing they cannot afford to do again. We all saw that first half, right? You can't have a slow start like that against the teams that are remaining on the schedule. You want to keep it locked right here? It's a Victory Sunday, and we're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. My friends, the holiday season is here. That means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. You know what? Get Mario Cristobal some of those spatulas. He's going to need a few more this recruiting season. Guys, I can't believe how fast everything ships from Wayfair. It's going to be here just in time for the holidays. Trust me. If you've ever hosted family for the holidays, you know how much difference a few new touches can make. Wayfair makes that so easy. Guys, don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale up to 70% off. That's WAYFAIR.com, and the sale will end on December 7th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen, and thank you so much to the Everydayers for help make the Locked On Podcast Network #1. We are the #1 sports podcasting network, and I don't want to give up that #1 spot. I don't, so we want to keep it rolling here on the Locked On family, and especially here on Locked On Canes. Okay, we'll talk about the slow start, but I want to talk about the strong finish first, because that's obviously the constructive part that Miami needs to take into these final 3 games. Remember, you still have NC State at home next week, your final home game senior day. Following week, you're on the road at Virginia Tech, and you're on the road at Pittsburgh to end the season. As we've all learned, not just in Miami's games, in everybody's games this year, you expect the unexpected in the ACC. You never know on any given weekend who's going to beat who. So in terms of that 38-10 win Miami got over Syracuse, the stat that I was most pleased with were the penalties. First time I'm saying that all year. Miami committed only 5 penalties on Saturday. Compare that to 12 the previous week. Only 5 penalties committed, 5 for 54 yards. Miami wins the penalty battle against Syracuse, who committed 6. And just to make sure I had this right, I went through the game logs, team stats for Miami's, previous, their previous 8 games before this past Saturday, just to make sure I had this right. And folks, against Syracuse, that was the first time all season Miami committed fewer penalties than the opponent. And that includes the Bethune-Cookman game. I didn't leave that one out just because it was Bethune-Cookman. I went back and checked that one. Bethune was only penalized twice. Miami was penalized 4 times in that game. So these 5 versus 6 penalties against Syracuse was the first time all season Miami won the penalty battle. And, you could say, hey, I need to see it against a better team. And I'll grant you that. Syracuse is not a good football team, right? And Miami also only had 5 penalties against Stanford, also not a good football team. So NC State is better. Virginia Tech, a little bit better than Syracuse. Pitt, a lot better than Syracuse. So this is something we need to carry over. But I will tell you, in terms of the big issue that had been plaguing the Hurricanes for most of the year, the false starts, that was noticeably better on Saturday. You could tell that there was a deliberate adjustment made to the cadence. Miami only committed 1 false start on Saturday, and there was a noticeable adjustment that was made in that regard. We can all say, how come you didn't do that sooner? It is what it is. But I know that was something that both Shannon Dawson and Mario Cristobal brought up midweek, was that we are making a very deliberate adjustment to try to cut down on the false starts. And on Saturday, it worked. It was noticeably different and noticeably better. Now, the offensive line actually started slow in terms of pass protection. They gave up a couple of sacks in the first half, which was not a fun thing to see, but they did seem to adjust that in the second half. And when they got the running game going, the pass protection got a lot better. That's complementary football. But, having the penalties down this week, that's something you absolutely have to carry into the following weeks because, you lost to SMU committing 12 penalties. I think you had 9 penalties in the loss against Louisville, which was way too much. I mean, you're going to be able to win football games because Miami physically obviously matches up well with everyone left on the schedule. So as long as you don't kill yourself with self-inflicted wounds, you're going to be able to put yourself in position. If you keep the penalties 5, 4, 3, whatever, you're going to have a better chance to win these upcoming football games. And the turnovers. Miami wins the takeaway battle +3 on Saturday. You had one throw. You had one that was like a near interception from Beck. You had another one that was intercepted, but it was rightfully called off because a holding penalty, so it probably wouldn't have been an INT if not for the holding. So Hurricanes took care of the football very well. You win the turnover margin +3. You win the penalties battle. You're going to win football games. And so that was part of the recipe. Keep that going. Pleased to see more explosive plays in this game because I've watched this offense all year. And one of the issues, and they've had obviously some very good performances, right? Against Florida State, they had a bunch of explosive plays, right? In some of the other games, not so much. Miami was, I'm not sure what they are now, but coming into the Syracuse game, Miami was, I think, 111th in the country in producing explosive plays of 20 or more yards. That's not good enough. So when you're putting yourself in a position where you've got third downs every 3 plays, you would say, and you're having to convert those, and your offense is playing in a 20-yard box, it's not a recipe for success. And, Miami, when they had their slow start Saturday, because they didn't get the offense really moving until the waning minutes of the first half, late second quarter, but that's when they started hitting explosive plays. The one that ignited the offense that I thought really sparked everything was the catch and run, 41 yards, by freshman receiver Dalen Upshaw. That helped the offense finally get going, and they seemed to loosen up, and they started to play less tight. Because one of the things that drove me crazy, and we haven't seen like the full 4-quarter performance yet from the offense, but they seem to play so tight and so anxious in certain spots. And when you can get a big play like that, like against Stanford when they loosened up, it was when you started to get those explosive Malachi Toney punt returns. That loosened everybody up. This time around, it was the Dalen Upshaw reception. And kudos to Upshaw, because you talk about next man up. I mean, he gets opportunities out there because C.J. Daniels was out injured, because Tony Johnson was out injured. I know JoJo Trader had kind of a rough one, had that part of the reason why the offense had such a slow start was Trader had like a sure first down explosive play that he dropped, a couple sacks given up. I thought it was more on that than play calling. Like I've been critical of Shannon Dawson's play calling in spots this year, but I thought that this was the best called game he's had this year. And the slow start from the offense, I don't put that on Dawson. I thought he was consistently good in this game. It was, execution, things, drops, and sacks early on. But when the offense got rolling, it got rolling. And something I really appreciate about what Miami's doing is consistently finding ways to get the football in Malachi Toney's hands. It's not rocket science. He's your most explosive, most versatile offensive player. The more you can do with Malachi, jet sweeps, end arounds, running the football. He did that a couple times on Saturday. This guy was a state champion quarterback last year at American Heritage. He can throw, and he throws a touchdown pass in this game to Carson Beck. So Miami ran their own version of the Philly special. We'll call it the Coral Gables special, where Malachi Toney pulls all the defenders to one side, and then he throws it to a wide open Carson Beck because everyone was chasing Toney, and Carson's able to basically waltz into the end zone. It was a really fun play. And listen, if you run some things like that, I know some people are like, hey, we showed too much and we wasted too much against Syracuse, but I think there's something to say for putting a lot on tape for defenses to have to think about, knowing, hey, I know for a few weeks it just seemed like you put 9 guys in the box and you're going to stop Miami. They have no other options, no creativity. We're showing creativity now, and I think that's going to take pressure off the running game, and it's going to take pressure off of Carson Beck, and I hope we keep the playbook open because the players seem to have a lot more fun when they're playing like this. So that was a cool touchdown. We saw a lot of creativity in this game. We also had the big man touchdown. We got to see CC Maui Noah gets into the end zone late in the game. Maui Noah told Don Bailey Jr. on WQAM after the game that Miami's had that play for 3 years, like since he's been at Miami. And then Mario Cristobal joked after the game. I think it was a joke. It's funny that was part of his recruiting pitch to Maui Noah, who's a former 5-star recruit out of high school. And he fulfilled that promise by getting him a touchdown. So that was fun. And Maui Noah said his only regret was he was hoping he'd be able to run over somebody. Like he didn't get a chance to truck anybody in the end zone because no one was really in his way for that one. But another thing, aside from the trick plays and the creativity, there were a handful of other offensive players, names that are less familiar, who stepped up in a big way. We'll start with Keelan Marion. He had a beautiful game. And I think we're going to need to see Keelan get more involved down the stretch run of the season because he's so fast. He can take the top off the defense, right? Keelan Marion in this game had chunk plays, receptions of 25 yards, 30 yards, and a 61-yard touchdown where Carson Beck hit him in stride, and nobody was catching Keelan. He's that fast. So we need to keep getting the football in his hands as well. Marion ended up leading Miami with 117 receiving yards on 3 catches. Super explosive day for him. I love it. Let's see. Okay, how about this one? I have been lobbying for this dude since, even before yesterday, because I'm a big fan. But freshman running back Girard Pringle, he got his opportunity, and he made the most of it. And in the case of Girard, people are like, hey, how come we weren't using this guy sooner? How come he wasn't getting 7, 8, 10 touches a game like a month and a half ago? For a freshman running back to get on the field consistently, a couple things have to happen beyond being able to just run the football. Have to be able to pass block, and you have to know the full playbook. And to Girard Pringle's credit, I think he has achieved those goals now to where the coaching staff trusts him and they're going to put him on the field more consistently. He was a revelation. So, okay, he gets more opportunities on Saturday because Miami's top rusher, Mark Fletcher, had to miss the game injured, right? We hope Fletch comes back soon. I don't know exactly how long he's going to be out. Cristobal kind of described it last week as more of like a week-to-week type of thing, so we may see Mark back soon. But Miami gives opportunities early in the game to Marty Brown, and to Jordan Lyle. And unfortunately, I don't claim to know exactly why, but Lyle just doesn't right now have the same sort of explosion, burst, and vision that he had last year. I guess he's trying to still rediscover that. But then in the third quarter, when Girard Pringle gets into the game, he is more explosive and more decisive of a runner, and he's got an extra gear as well, but he's more explosive and more decisive than either of the other 2 backs were yesterday. So Girard, and he's got that extra gear. The guy can take off. The guy can get around the edge. So Girard Pringle, as a true freshman, I think is someone we're going to see more of the next 3 weeks, and we should. So obvious, and defensively as well, I want to make sure I don't forget about Miami's defense because the team produced 7 sacks in the game. And Ruben Bain got his first sack in a while. I know he was overdue, right? Leading the country in pressures and everything, but hadn't actually taken a quarterback down in a hot second. And, man, Akeem Mesidor gets sacks in the game. Jacoby Thomas and Keontae Scott, to me, might have been the co-MVPs of the defense on Saturday. Keontae Scott gets a pick 6, which really helped Miami's momentum because it was right after the Hurricanes scored their first offensive touchdown of the game. They're up 7-0. Couple plays later, Syracuse, Ricky Collins, who's not good, but hey, fine with me. He throws the pick 6 to Keontae Scott, and Miami really gains momentum from that point. And Jacoby Thomas, he had an interception, he had a sack, and he had a fumble recovery. So that's a hell of a game. You talk about affecting the game, multiple different levels on defense. I thought those DBs played exceptionally well for the Hurricanes, and Raul Aguirre leads Miami in tackles yesterday. Xavier Lucas, Damari Brown, Mohamed Toure also right up there in the tackle count. Justin Scott, I want to give him credit. He played a really, really good game. The second-year defensive tackle, who's getting more playing time with injuries. Ahmad Moten banged up, injuries on the defensive line. Justin Scott is making the most of his opportunities. He had 4 tackles in the game, 2 TFL. Justin Scott played exceptionally well, was in the backfield a lot. So Miami's defense, I'm not breaking any news here. The defense this year has been college football playoff caliber. It's been the offense that has held the team back at times. And, the offense is the primary reason why Miami is a 2-loss team. And so my message for the week coming up is whatever sort of juice you discovered late in the second quarter and seemed to have that for the rest of the game offensively, you can't wait as long to drink that juice next week. North Carolina State, their offense can score, I believe, on anybody, right? I mean, listen, Miami might be the best defense that NC State has faced all year. Miami might hold them to a lower point total than most, but that offense playing at a really high level with CJ Bailey, a quarterback, South Florida kid, Hollywood Chaminade Madonna. You don't think he's going to come down here with a chip on his shoulder and want to tear Miami apart? We're going to get NC State's best. Hollywood Smothers, one of the best running backs in the ACC. Justin Jolie, one of the best tight ends in the country. Like, NC State has an offense that has multiple weapons, and they can hurt you in a lot of different ways. So my message for next week is the Hurricanes offense needs to start fast, right? Because even if your defense is probably more likely, to take over the game than NC State's would be, Miami can't hurt themselves in this game. You're going to need to put up points early because you could find yourself, if your offense is punting on your first 3 or 4 drives, which was the case the other day, you could find yourself down by 2 scores pretty quickly against NC State. So that's my big takeaway. The offense needs to start fast next week. And, if Miami wins again next week, you try to go 1-0 every week, you are going to be in position to perhaps backdoor your way into the college football playoff. So you got a little boost over the weekend. Maybe backdoor your way into the ACC Championship game. We'll talk about those scenarios when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to just ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, new customers can get $300 in bonus bets on FanDuel when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure to check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the and by the way, Kenton, he and I have a big week because we're going head-to-head. He's locked on NC State. I'm locked on Hurricanes. So we're going to be going head-to-head next week, Miami versus NC State. We will have a lot to talk about. All right, so if you look at a crazy weekend in the ACC, the most important bullet points here are 2 teams that were ranked ahead of Miami, who have actually now both fallen behind Miami in the AP poll. CFP poll is coming out on Tuesday, so we'll find more out there. Virginia, they lost at home to Wake Forest 16-9. So Virginia drops down a few spots from number 14. They dropped behind Miami. That was UVA, their second total loss on the year. Their first official ACC loss, so they're 5-1 in the ACC. Wake Forest helped us out by beating UVA. That was one. And then these games, by the way, ended within a few minutes of each other. So it was like a double whammy, right? Louisville lost to Cal. Number 15, Louisville, fell 29-26 at home to the Cal Golden Bears. JKS, exciting young Cal quarterback, throws for 323 yards. So Louisville also now drops behind Miami in the AP. So in the AP poll, Miami moves up from number 18 to number 16. Now, is the playoff committee going to see it the same way? If you notice, the first batch of CFP rankings were not exactly the same, but it was like pretty close to a cut and paste job from the AP poll last week. Miami ranked 18th in both polls. So, but here's my question though, because we hear a lot about this head-to-head nonsense, right? And Barry Jackson wrote something on X on Saturday because he heard, I was at the game, so I wasn't listening to the TV broadcast, but Chris Budden, who is a reporter on the TV broadcast, mentioned that. So the College Football Playoff Committee said that the reason why they, in their words, were forced to ignore Miami's head-to-head win against Notre Dame was they only factor in head-to-head if the teams are only separated by 3 spots or less in the ranking. And I hear that. It's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. Completely asinine. You bozos are the ones who make the rankings. So you're telling me, we couldn't do the head-to-head for Miami over Notre Dame because they're ranked 8 spots behind them. So we don't factor in the head-to-head. But who ranked them 8 spots behind? You did! And it's not as if Miami has 2 more losses than Notre Dame. Like they have identical 7-2 records, 6-2 last week. And so my question is the committee going to value or ignore Louisville's head-to-head loss? Head-to-head victory, Miami's head-to-head loss against Louisville. Because, obviously we know Louisville at 7-2, one of their 7 wins was head-to-head against the Hurricanes. So we are about to see, I believe, either inconsistency, which could benefit Miami, I guess, or hypocrisy that will be a detriment to Miami. So the College Football Playoff Committee, if they feel that Miami and Louisville are just a couple spots apart, are they going to come out and say, well, you know what? We're going to have Miami at 17 and we're going to keep Louisville at 16 because of the head-to-head. And you know what? I wouldn't come out and bash Louisville for that because, they've got the head-to-head, they've got identical records, but I sure as hell would bash the committee if that head-to-head matters and yet the Miami head-to-head over Notre Dame doesn't. So we'll see. Is Miami going to be in front of the Cardinals in the CFP ranking or behind them? I do think Miami's going to be in front of Virginia either way. So we're about to see either inconsistency or hypocrisy on the next batch of CFP rankings. So, we'll see. But again, like all Miami can do is win out, go 10-2, and hope that enough teams ranked in front of you lose. It's actually theoretically easier for us to get into the CFP than the ACC Championship game. So here is, I asked Grok for a little help on this one, I will admit. Just to see the schedules and everything, because part of this scenario is obvious, right? Of course, Virginia picks up their first conference loss. Louisville picks up their second conference loss. Georgia Tech was off this week, but they lost their first game and their first conference loss last week. So, all of this stuff is keeping Miami alive, okay? But if Miami is going to get into the ACC Championship game, we have 2 conference losses right now, right? There are 5 teams in front of Miami that currently have 1 conference loss. Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pitt, SMU, and Duke. So for Miami to get into the ACC Championship game, or to have a chance to, because there's going to be multi-team tiebreakers that come into play, you need 4 out of those 5 teams to lose again. And you need to have a bunch of teams in a soup of ACC mediocrity with 2 conference losses, and you have to hope that tiebreakers like head-to-head victories or winning percentage of common opponents, tiebreakers like that Miami comes out ahead of multiple teams on that. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. So you go through the remaining schedule. So Miami has 3 ACC games left. The teams in front of you only have 2 apiece. So again, you need 4 out of these 5 teams to lose at least 1 more conference game. Georgia Tech still has NC State and Pitt. That's not an easy schedule. Both of those teams are pretty good. So, maybe Georgia Tech loses one of those, right? Virginia still has Duke and Pitt. Honestly, I could see Virginia losing both of those, not just one of those. But you also need well, you know what? Pitt, Miami has the head-to-head against Pitt. So it doesn't Virginia can beat Pitt. That doesn't or they can beat Virginia, I should say. That doesn't matter because Miami will have the head-to-head against Pitt. But Pitt also has one conference loss, and they still have Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. SMU still has Louisville and Clemson in the conference schedule, and Duke still has Virginia and NC State. So again, you need 4 out of those 5 teams to lose at least one conference game the rest of the way, and Miami has to win out. None of this matters if Miami doesn't win their 3 remaining games. Home against NC State, then at Virginia Tech, and at Pitt is Miami's remaining schedule. So I know we've said a lot today. Drop your comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys on the Syracuse game. And I know it was like it was frustrating at times. The first quarter and a half, I described Miami's offense the first quarter and a half as coma-inducing. I'm glad they found their footing, though, and I hope that they can carry over the looseness, the juice, the creativity, and the explosive plays because they hit several of those. You got to carry those into the remaining games. And then my advice to the defense is just keep doing what you're doing. You know, I mean, the game was like 23 seconds away from being 38-3, which would have looked a little bit better. But, you know, Syracuse gets the garbage touchdown with their backups against Miami's backups on the field. It is what it is, the garbage time. But a win is a win, and Miami needs to keep winning. Want to thank everyone so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Want to thank you also so much for helping this network. Locked On Network is now number one sports podcast network in the world. Keep it going. We'll talk to everyone next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. Welcome to the JJ Dunnigan. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Number one, and we're your team every day.